On our 8th wedding anniversary, my wife and I went to file for divorce. To gain custody of our daughter, I was willing to leave with nothing. As I drove, she said coldly, "Tong Tong isn't your biological daughter." Lost in thought, I crashed into an oncoming truck. At the moment of impact, she suddenly reached out to me, shielding me with her body. The violent crash and pain knocked us both unconscious. Fortunately, both my wife and I survived. In the double ward, I woke up first. Seeing my wife in the next bed, unconscious with a bandage on her forehead, I quickly climbed out of bed and knelt beside her. I held her slightly cold hand, and memories of our courtship and love flooded my mind. My name is Qin Fei, and my wife and Qian and I were college sweethearts. Married for 8 years, we have a lovely 5-year-old daughter, Tong Tong. But today, my wife told me that our daughter isn't mine. This meant she had an affair. Recalling how Qian shielded me without hesitation during the crash, I couldn't understand. She was willing to die for me, yet insisted on divorcing me. And she cheated on me. And Qian and I are both 30 years old. I work outside the home, she manages the household, and we live a relatively comfortable life. Compared to our college days, her face hasn't aged much. Looking at Qian's pale face as she slept, a thought suddenly crossed my mind. I wish she would stay asleep, never wake up, so she wouldn't leave me. When she wakes up, I have a lot of questions for her. A nurse happened to come in for rounds. Anxiously, I asked, "Nurse, why hasn't my wife woken up yet? Is she all right?" Holding a medical report, the nurse came over and reassured me. "Mr. Qin, don't worry, Ms. And Qian is not in any life-threatening danger. She hit her head and has a mild concussion. She should wake up soon." The nurse's tone shifted, becoming cautious. "As for you, Mr. Qin, I hope you're prepared." Feeling confused, I took the report she handed me. I glanced over the contents, my eyes locking onto the final diagnosis. The nurse said regretfully, "You have late-stage stomach cancer. You've missed the best time for treatment, and the chances of a successful surgery are slim. You should discuss with your wife whether you want to be hospitalized." My mind went blank. I had just been grateful to have survived a potentially fatal car accident, only to be met with this. After the nurse left, I sat by the bed, quietly gazing at Qian's face. Her eyelashes fluttered, and I realized she was about to wake up. Quickly, I crumpled the report and stuffed it into my pocket. "Wife, can we please not get divorced?" I asked desperately. Late-stage stomach cancer, most likely incurable. I didn't have much time left, and I was hesitant to tell her the truth. And Qian was a kind and gentle person. That's what I loved about her from the beginning. But when it came to the divorce, she was resolute. "Qin Fei, I made myself clear. Once I recover and leave the hospital, we'll get divorced. Just consider it my fault. I only want our daughter. The company, the house, they're all yours." When Qian married me, we were both penniless. For the first 2 years of our marriage, we scrimped and saved. Coupled with my starting a business, life was hard. But no matter how hard it was, we made it through together. And Qian was beautiful. Many male classmates pursued her in college, and I was one of her secret admirers. She was a talented photography major from a wealthy family. If her family hadn't gone bankrupt, her parents hadn't passed away, and her friends hadn't abandoned her, I wouldn't have had a chance with her. We built our success from nothing, together. Now that we had it, she wanted to leave me, taking our daughter with her. You've refused to tell me, and I haven't asked. Aunt Qian, why do you really want a divorce? Tong Tong not being my biological daughter. You could have kept that secret forever. Why tell me? The hospital room held only the two of us. Her face was pale against the pillow, and I held her hand tightly. I was dying. I didn't care if she'd been unfaithful. I just wanted to know why. Wife, I vowed on our wedding day to take care of you for the rest of my life until I die. I don't care whose daughter Tong Tong is. As long as you don't divorce me, I'll pretend nothing happened. I grew up in an orphanage. I didn't have much of a sense of blood ties or family. I loved Aunt Qian, so I loved her daughter. Insisting on custody was just my unwillingness to let Aunt Qian go, hoping to hold on to her through the child. I was despicable and selfish. All my sincerity was poured into her. 8 years, Qin. Don't you have any attachment to this marriage? If you didn't have any feelings for me, why did you marry me in the first place? Why didn't you mention divorce when you first had the affair? Now that the child is older, you want to find her a new father? 8 years of your youth wasted. What for? I was so angry, I blurted out everything in my heart. Qin's eyes reddened, tears flowing down the corners of her eyes. She wiped her tears, covered her face with one hand, and choked out, "Zhou Zhili." He came back to me. Zhou Zhili was Qin's first love in college. Not quite a first love, they only had a long period of ambiguity, never officially dating. But the classmates and friends around them all assumed they were a couple. Even I thought they would get married after graduation. Before her family went bankrupt, Qin was a well-off and excellent student, and Zhou Zhili was a good match for her. In her junior year, Zhou Zhili went abroad to study. He didn't say when he would return, and he didn't even formally confess to Qin, give her the status of a girlfriend. In short, he was neither proactive nor responsible. Immediately afterward, Qin's family business fell into crisis, and they went bankrupt. Her father died of a serious illness, and her mother died of depression. I was working part-time as a teaching assistant at the school, often helping in the student affairs office. That afternoon, Qin applied to the counselor to drop out of school, crying and saying that there had been an accident at home and she couldn't continue her studies. Through my teacher, I learned that Qin's parents had left behind a debt of 200,000 yuan. For Qin, whose family had already fallen on hard times, this was an astronomical figure. I majored in computer science and started taking on freelance projects for my freshman year to save money. After a few years, I had saved over 100,000. I had originally planned to start a business with 2 senior classmates, but I ultimately gave up on the idea. I withdrew all my savings and borrowed a little from my roommates, gathering a total of 200,000 yuan in cash. At that time, Qin and I weren't close. We had only met briefly at a volunteer event, exchanging just a few words. Her uncle took care of her parents' funeral arrangements. I gave the money to her uncle, specifically telling him that I was Qin's classmate and that she didn't need to repay it. I didn't reveal any other information. Later, Qin returned to school, and we both participated in the school sports meet. I signed up for the men's 3,000-meter race, and she was part of the support staff. After the race, she handed me a bottle of water. Although others did too, I was still very happy. In our senior year, we interned at the same company. She was a behind-the-scenes photographer, and I was involved in software development. There were about a dozen of us, and we often ate together. Gradually, we became familiar with each other. On graduation day, I confessed my feelings, she accepted, and we eloped. I knew that Qin still held feelings for her first love, but I didn't expect that. After 8 years of marriage, Zhou Zhili would actually come back to find her. "So Tong Tong is Zhou Zhili's child?" I asked tentatively, and Qin pursed her lips and didn't answer. Utterly disappointed, I let go of her hand. A nanny took care of our daughter at home, and the child didn't know about the divorce. Tong Tong called Qin on her smartwatch, and they chatted for a while. Qin looked at me with a slightly troubled expression. "Tong Tong wants to talk to you." I took her phone with a blank expression, and hearing that affectionate daddy made me feel a mix of emotions. Mommy and Daddy have some things to do tonight. We'll be back in a couple of days. Tong Tong, take care of yourself and listen to the nanny. You have school tomorrow, so go to bed early. The lights were turned off at night, and the ward was pitch black. The atmosphere was oppressive, and neither of us could sleep. And Qin's voice was a little hoarse, and it took her a long time to muster the courage. "Qin Fei, I'm sorry, I still love him. She loved Zhou Zhili, yet she married me. As soon as he returned, she abandoned me. So what am I? A spare tire?" And Qin's injuries were more serious than mine, so following the doctor's advice, I stayed with her in the hospital. Every time I saw the wound on her forehead from the car accident, I would be extremely annoyed, unable to get angry at all. She was able to risk her life to protect me, but she didn't love me. While Qin was taking an afternoon nap, I went to see the doctor for an examination. "Doctor, please tell me honestly, what are the chances of a cure with surgery?" The middle-aged doctor wearing glasses looked troubled and answered truthfully. The cancer cells have spread extensively. The success rate of surgery is only 10%. 1/10 chance of survival is equivalent to none. With a reckless attitude, I asked, if I don't receive treatment, how long do I have to live? 3 or 4 months with medication, maybe about half a year. The longer this disease drags on, the more painful it becomes. You should make plans early. I understand. I stood up, and then I asked him, if my wife asks, please keep my condition a secret. A week later, we were discharged from the hospital. I focused on driving, while Qin looked at the scenery outside the car window, saying nothing. We arrived home at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and Tong Tong would be home for school soon. I changed into slippers and sat on the living room sofa, casually tossing my coat aside, and took out 2 cans of beer from the wine cabinet. The sound of the host reporting the news on the turned-on TV broke the silent and awkward atmosphere between Qin and me. Qin helped me hang up my clothes and asked, shall I cook tonight? What would you like to eat? Fish or ribs? Doesn't Tong Tong like those? I didn't turn to look at her expression. She stood there in a daze for a while, then turned and went to the kitchen. After marriage, I took on most of the housework, and she rarely went into the kitchen, especially during her pregnancy, which happened to be the busiest time for my software company when it first opened. I left early and came home late every day, hiring a nanny and a driver for her, not letting her do any chores. Thinking back on all these years together, I took a big gulp of beer. The more I thought, the more unfair it felt. Why did I have to be the one to die after giving so much? I'd taken such good care of her, yet the only person in her heart was that Zhou Zhili, the man who abandoned her and disappeared. Qin Fei, come get the dishes. Hearing Qin call from the kitchen, I set down the empty beer can and walked over. Qin Fei, come get the dishes. Hearing Qin call from the kitchen, I set down the empty beer can and walked over. Hearing Qin call from the kitchen, I set down the empty beer can and walked over. Picking up the plate of sweet and sour pork ribs, I looked at Qin, her hair tied up and wearing an apron. Suddenly, I blurted out, when you slept with me, were you thinking of Zhou Zhili? What? Between the exhaust fan and the sizzling food, Qin hadn't heard me clearly. Irritated, I avoided her gaze. Nothing. Irritated, I avoided her gaze. Nothing. When Tong Tong was born, I thought she looked just like Qin, a miniature version. Our daughter didn't resemble me. Like Qin, Tong Tong grew up in a happy family. At dinner, Tong Tong chattered cheerfully about her day at kindergarten as usual, and I played the role of doting father, smiling and responding. Only Qin seemed preoccupied, barely touching her food. After dinner, Qin stroked Tong Tong's hair. Go to your room and do your homework. Annie will give you a bath later. As soon as our daughter left, Qin's expression turned serious. Tong Tong starts elementary school after summer vacation, and we need to prepare the family information for enrollment. Let's finalize the divorce procedures soon. I'll take her back to my hometown. I responded indifferently. She'll have access to better educational resources here. In your hometown, you only have your uncle, and your photography job keeps you busy. Weren't you supposed to get a promotion at the end of the year? I responded indifferently. She'll have access to better educational resources here. In your hometown, you only have your uncle, and your photography job keeps you busy. Weren't you supposed to get a promotion at the end of the year? I've already resigned. Qin's gaze was firm, without a trace of regret. I frowned. What about Zhou Zhili? Are you going to live with him? Guilt and a guilty conscience made Qin lower her head slightly. Yes, he recently returned to the country and plans to settle down in my hometown. No wonder. You can't wait to take our daughter away. The 3 of you reunited, happy and blissful. I'm all alone, with only a few months left to live. It's really unfair. The doctor advised me to drink less, but I poured a glass of baijiu and gulped it down. When are you and him planning to get married? I poured another glass, wondering if I should crash their wedding. Qin shook her head, unsure herself. I don't know. Could it be that that bastard hadn't even promised to marry her? He just beckoned casually, and she dropped everything to run to him? I looked at Qin. disappointed that she hadn't lived up to my expectations. He's doing it again, throwing all the problems and risks at you. I don't understand. What exactly do you like about him? Aside from the birth that I couldn't choose, how am I inferior to him? And Qian looked at me with a resentful gaze and said faintly, "The beginning of a relationship is always beautiful, but in reality, the end is always the same. Even without Zhou Zhili, I would have ended this marriage." After saying these inexplicable words, she turned and walked into the bedroom without looking back. We agreed to pretend to be a loving couple in front of Tong Tong, so we still shared a room. After showering, I came out with a towel and found Qian already lying on her side, asleep. I carefully dried my hair and got into bed from the other side. Staring at the ceiling, I sighed wearily. So eager to reunite with your old lover. Couldn't you have waited a few more months? The next morning, I woke up with Qian sleeping soundly in my arms. I'm used to sleeping with my arm around her waist, and for 8 years, she hasn't found it annoying. I propped myself up on my elbow, wanting to kiss her face. Just then, a cell phone rang. Startled, I quickly pulled back. It was Qian's phone. She brushed her long hair aside and sat up groggily to answer. "Hello." After hanging up, she turned to me and said, "I have a class reunion tonight. I might be back late. Please help check Tong Tong's homework and remind her to eat properly." She got out of bed to change. I asked directly, "Will Zhou Zhili be there too?" "Yeah, those two." I suddenly cursed in my heart. That afternoon, I postponed a meeting and left work early to go home, just as Qian was putting on makeup. I walked behind her and stared at her. She was doing her eyebrows and raised her eyes, meeting my gaze in the mirror. "You're back so early today?" "It's a class reunion. I'll go with you." Even if she refuses, I'm going. I want to see how well Zhou Zhili, the one she can't forget, is doing now. Putting down her eyebrow pencil, and Qian seemed unconcerned. "Whatever, if you want to go. Didn't you say you were very busy at the company this week? Then next week, take some time off, and we'll go to the Civil Affairs Bureau." After she finished her makeup and changed into a beautiful dress, I drove her to the upscale restaurant where the reunion was being held. While riding the elevator up, I kept glancing at Qian, who was exquisitely dressed. She noticed my peeking and was a bit speechless. "Why are you staring at me? What? Do you think it's ridiculous that I'm 30 and a mother, yet I'm still dressing up so flamboyantly?" I smiled and complimented her. "Even when you're 60, you won't be ugly. In my eyes, she will always be as beautiful as the first time I met her. Zhou Zhili is the white moonlight at the tip of her heart, and so is she for me." The elevator doors opened, and Qian stepped out first. "Are you being sarcastic? When you see me at 60, you won't say that." "Unfortunately, I won't see it," I murmured softly. She doesn't know that I only have a few months left. Although Qian betrayed our marriage, I still love her deeply. I also thought about ending it all, taking him down with me. But instead of wasting energy on revenge, I'd rather spend the end of my life with her, slowly, and then have a good ending. I bought a burial plot, and I'm planning to sell the company, leaving all my assets to Qian and the child. I'm just here to confirm whether this person, Zhou Zhili, is worthy of her trust. "Is everyone here?" "Sorry, I was held up in traffic for a bit." As soon as we entered the private room, we saw a dozen or so people sitting around the dining table, and Qian and I were the last to arrive. She apologized with a smile. A woman sitting closer to the door stood up, completely ignoring me, and warmly embraced Qian. "Finally, I get to see you. It hasn't been easy. You said you had to take care of your daughter, and canceled twice already." The woman was Qian's college roommate and best friend, Su Yao Yao. She pinched Qian's cheek and couldn't help but praise. "It's been years. How come you haven't aged a bit? I'm so envious." "Oh, is this your ex-husband? What's he doing here? Oh wait, are you two divorced now?" And Qian must have mentioned the divorce to her. The unexpected car accident had postponed the divorce date. Because she didn't want her friends to worry, and Qian hid the fact that she was injured and hospitalized. Her best friend thought Qian was successfully single again and was curious as to why she brought me, this eyesore, along. And Qian smiled nonchalantly. "We haven't finalized the divorce yet, but it's coming soon." I scanned the room and asked, Zhou Zhili isn't here? Everyone attending the gathering were in Qian's close friends and confidants, and they all knew about Zhou Zhili and her past relationship. But it seemed a bit strange for me to mention the name of Qian's first love. Su Yaoyao immediately chimed in. Oh, he got a call a while ago and stepped out. You guys sit down first. Let's not wait for him. We'll order first. She pulled in Qin to sit next to her and whispered some things, seemingly complaining about my uninvited presence. And Qian's friends didn't welcome me and didn't respect me. In their minds, I was already in Qian's ex-husband, and Zhou Zhili was the rightful partner. Before long, a man pushed the door open. It was Zhou Zhili. Unlike the polite and refined young master I remembered, the man before me had undergone several years of polishing and settling, and his figure was slightly out of shape. He carried a sense of middle-aged frustration, and his skin was a bit tanned. The spirited demeanor of his college days was completely gone. And Qian, you're here. Zhou Zhili's eyes fell on my wife first, and his eyes instantly lit up. He walked straight towards Qian. I stepped in front and extended my hand. Hello, I'm Qian's husband. My name is Qin Fei. Zhou Zhili reluctantly shook my hand, politely responding, hello. Due to my arrival, the gathering that was originally intended to rekindle the old flame between Qian and Zhou Zhili became quiet and deserted. After just a few drinks, my stomach started to feel uncomfortable with a cramping, spasmodic pain. I suppressed the urge to vomit and went to the restroom. My stomach ached for a while before my symptoms eased. In the hallway, returning to the private room, I overheard two of Qian's male classmates chatting. It's ridiculous. Zhou Zhili used to ignore Qian, but now he's in debt abroad and can't make it, so he's coming to his old lover for help. He's even encouraging them to get a divorce. I think he's after half of Qian's marital assets, right? Didn't Qian and her husband start a company together? They must have money. I deliberately waited a few minutes after they entered the private room before re-entering, pretending I hadn't heard their conversation. Unsure of the truth of those words, I decided to test Zhou Zhili. At the party, Zhou Zhili proudly talked about his experience doing business abroad. He also brought Qian a gift. It was a diamond necklace. When I saw it in an Australian mall, I thought it would suit you perfectly. Qian, I promised I'd spend your 21st birthday with you, but unfortunately, my family insisted on sending me to study abroad, and I missed it. He picked up the necklace, walked past me, and approached Qian. Consider this a belated birthday present. I don't know if you'll like it. Let me put it on for you. I, her legal husband, am not dead yet, and he's already eager to seduce my wife. The key is, and Qian accepted it readily and was deeply moved. Her eyes were filled with Zhou Zhili. That affectionate look made me recall many years ago in a daze. Back then, I was also in this bystander's perspective, envying their perfect campus romance. I gripped the wine glass tightly, my stomach burning. I interrupted their sweet moment. And Qian, congratulations on getting what you wanted. After all this time, you're finally reunited with your first love. To be free and be with him, you were willing to leave with nothing, not a penny, and even quit your job. You sacrificed so much. I hope he doesn't disappoint you. Hearing this, Zhou Zhili's smile stiffened, but he quickly recovered. He feigned gratitude and came over to toast me. Qin Fei, no matter what, I still want to thank you for taking care of Qian all these years. From now on, I will take on the responsibility of taking care of her and her daughter. How ridiculous. You're the other man who stole her away. What right do you have to thank me? I ignored his bowed gesture of toasting and said coldly, I heard that, mister. Zhou has invested in many companies abroad and is now worth a fortune. Even if Qian loses her job and has nothing, with you as her support, she can continue to live a life of luxury. As long as she has a good home, I can rest assured. As soon as I finished speaking, Qian gave me a complicated look. She was unhappy because I had embarrassed them in public. Zhou Zhili smiled generously. Of course, I won't let her and the child suffer. When the gathering ended, Qian asked me to go downstairs first. She had things to discuss with her friends. I waited in the car and saw Qian and a group of people walking out of the door. She waved goodbye to the others, then stood face to face with Zhou Zhili, holding hands, chatting intimately for a few minutes, and finally hugged. When she opened the car door and sat in the passenger seat, and Qian had a clear smile on her lips. "What did you talk about that made you so happy?" I asked casually. "You don't need to know, just drive." And Qian lowered her head and took off the necklace around her neck, carefully placing it in her bag for safekeeping. I pressed the accelerator, feeling a pang of jealousy. "I've given you jewelry before, but I've never seen you this happy." And Qian admitted. Zhou Zhili told me that he recently suffered investment failures and sold his house, car, and watches. But he kept this diamond necklace because he promised me it was a gift for my 21st birthday. I was speechless for a moment. "Since you already know that he's broke now, you still want to be with him?" "Yes, I love him." And Qian replied without hesitation. "Then what am I? What was our 8-year marriage?" And Qian was momentarily speechless. On the way home, and Qian recounted a past event. "I don't know if you've heard, but when I was a junior in college, my family's business went bankrupt due to mismanagement. My parents passed away, and there was still a debt left. If Zhou Zhili hadn't paid off my debt, I might not have been able to graduate smoothly. None of my friends helped me at that time. Thanks to him, I didn't end up dropping out of school to work." And Qian's soliloquy stunned me on the spot. In her junior year, her parents passed away one after another, leaving only her uncle, who had lost his wife and son years ago, to depend on. Her family's business was sabotaged by a competitor, leaving them with a huge debt. Selling all their assets still couldn't fill the hole. She used to spend money like water, easily spending 6 figures on a single piece of jewelry. She never imagined she would one day be worried about a mere 200,000. People are naturally inclined to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. And Qian lost the halo of a wealthy heiress, and all her former friends abandoned her. Her beauty attracted too many people with malicious intentions. Classmates, alumni, and even her father's former business partners all wanted to kick her while she was down. At that time, her uncle, in order to help her through the difficulties, was prepared to mortgage his house to the bank, rent a random place, and continue to support her studies. Under the pressure from all sides, and Qian had an emotional breakdown and decided to drop out of school. Every person who offered her a helping hand had ulterior motives, so she simply didn't trust anyone. At that time, I had no way to get close to her. She was full of thorns. She would only think that the money was to buy her body or her marriage. And I, like those swarming flies, was just as despicable and shameless, kicking her when she was down. That's why I chose to keep it a secret and gave the money directly to her uncle. As long as the debt problem was solved, she could continue her studies and have a good future after graduation. I was clearly the one who did the good deed without seeking recognition. So how did Zhou Zhili get the credit? Who told you that the person who helped you was Zhou Zhili? And Qian said righteously, "My uncle said that the boy who delivered the money was my college classmate. Besides my first love, who would silently give so much without asking for anything in return." I was about to say that person was me, but Qian, in a sarcastic tone, didn't give me a chance to speak. I already asked Zhou Zhili, and he admitted it was him. I've already paid him back, using my own savings. It has nothing to do with you. Why are you so agitated? I was furious. He's so shameless. That money was clearly what I gave to your uncle. And Qian swept me with a contemptuous look and turned her face away. Forget it. I don't want to talk to you. Back home, and Qian went to the bedroom to check on our sleeping daughter. She sat in front of the mirror, removing her makeup, while I persistently clung to her. Let's go to your hometown together to see your uncle, or make a video call and ask him who exactly gave him the money. And Qian tilted her head, taking off her earrings, too tired to deal with me. I'm very tired, Qin Fei. I know you don't want a divorce, and you'll say anything, even lies. I love Zhou Zhili, and it's not entirely because of that money. Yes, if she were vain, she wouldn't have married me. If she loved Zhou Zhili's former handsomeness and talent, she wouldn't have, after seeing Zhou Zhili's decline, still insisted on throwing herself into that man's arms. Suddenly, my stomach started hurting again. I covered my mouth and ran to the sink to vomit. Along with the bitter liquid, a pool of thick blood came out. "What's wrong? Did you eat something bad?" And Qian's carrying words sounded behind me. I frantically turned on the faucet to wash away the blood and pushed her away forcefully. "Don't come near me." Perhaps it was my pride. I only wanted to be her support. I didn't want her to see me in my weakened state. My emotions were tense, and I fiercely accused her. "Go find your first love. This home can't hold you. You gave up on this yourself. I'm telling you, I won't pay child support for Tong Tong. You won't get a single penny." And Qian wasn't angry. Instead, she apologized to me with a sad face. "I'm sorry, husband. I admit you've been very good to me all these years, but when the feelings are gone, they're gone. You are capable and patient. No matter who you marry, you will be happy. But only when I'm with Zhou Zhili can I feel happiness." Her eyes were red-rimmed as she looked at me, begging me to let her go. In a daze, I recalled our wedding 8 years ago. That day, she also had tears in her eyes, crying so pitifully. At the time, all the guests thought the bride was shedding tears of happiness. Only I and her best friend knew that she was crying for her dead love with Zhou Zhili. The perfect wedding of her dreams. Yet she married a man she didn't love at all. She had locked herself in the cage of marriage. How could she not cry? The words "I do" that won the cheers of the whole audience. Who were they really for? Probably only she knew in her heart. Suppressing the pain in my body, I stepped forward and put my arm around Qian's back, holding her tight. "Since you chose him, don't regret it." She didn't even raise her hand to hug me back. All I received was, "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." As I let go of her, I made up my mind. I had to let her go. Thinking back carefully over these years, from the time we met and fell in love to our marriage, it was always me who took the initiative. I held her too tightly. After she experienced Zhou Zhili's abandonment and family changes, before she had completely emerged from her previous relationship and pain, I forced my way into her world. There was a lamp in her heart that shone only for Zhou Zhili, and it was extinguished because of that man's departure. I tried hard to repair it, hoping she would have a sliver of warmth for me, but in the end, I was hurt by that light. Some people, some things, you really can't force. We were husband and wife. Let's part on good terms. Because of the severe stomach pain, I was so weak that I couldn't even walk, so I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching my abdomen to catch my breath. And Qian poured a glass of warm water and handed it to me, saying with concern, "You look very haggard. Are you sick? Shall I take you to the hospital?" "No need, it's just a bad stomach." I took the glass of water, and Qian bit her lip in hesitation for a while, stammering, "I want to discuss something with you. I want Zhou Zhili to move in, just for a little while. He's in a tight spot financially and doesn't have a place to stay for now." I tightened my grip on the water glass, looking at her without a word. Seeing my silence, her tone held a hint of resentment. "Just letting him stay for a few days, is that not okay?" The water she had just handed me, I hadn't taken a single sip. I placed it on the bedside table. "Do as you please." With my confirmation, and Qian breathed a sigh of relief. She smiled gratefully and took out her phone to message Zhou Zhili. As I walked out of the room, I looked back at Qian and said to her calmly, "I agree to the divorce." This had always been her wish, but when she heard me say it out loud, she seemed surprised. The hand holding the phone trembled slightly. "What did you say?" "The lawyer said the divorce agreement is being processed and will be delivered to my house in 2 days. The content of the agreement follows the result of my first negotiation with Qian. She gets custody of her daughter, and I get all the assets. I plan to sell the company and spend the rest of my life in a nursing home. This house will be left to her and the child. Whether she wants to continue living here with Zhou Zhili or sell it, it's up to her. I'll be moving out soon, and I'm already packing my things. And Qian doesn't know I'm leaving, and I don't plan to tell her in advance." On the living room wall hung our wedding photo. It had been there for 8 years, dusted weekly, the frame a little faded. In a flash, my face seemed to morph into Zhou Zhili's. Once, Qian and Zhou Zhili were the model couple on campus, everyone saying they were a perfect match, made for each other. If, back then, Qian had married Zhou Zhili, her smile would undoubtedly have been even more radiant than in the photo. I hung this picture myself, and today I took it down again. I broke the frame, tore up the photo, and, along with the family portraits and photo albums at home, anything that proved I ever existed, I threw it all into the stove. Crackling sparks, extinguished and leaving only burnt ashes. Once the smell of burning had completely dissipated from the room, they came back, laughing and talking, having had enough fun outside. I went up to them, smiling and greeting my daughter. Tong Tong, with a smile on her face, showed off to me, "Dad, our family is going to have a new friend. His name is Toffee. Isn't he cute?" Looking closely, I saw she was holding a pet dog in her arms. A curly-haired teddy, with big eyes, very pleasing to the eye. I'm severely allergic to cat and dog fur, so we haven't had any pets at home all these years. Tong Tong had thrown a few tantrums at me because of this. "Why did you bring a dog back?" As soon as I said that, Qin and Zhou Zhili, who had changed their shoes, glared at me in unison with strange looks. "What do you mean? Are you cursing us by illusion?" And Qin was furious. I was about to question her why. Knowing that I'm allergic to animal fur, she still bought a dog to spite me. Zhou Zhili, very perceptive, quickly played the good guy and held in Qian's hand. "Qian, it's okay. I was presumptuous to begin with. I don't want to cause any more trouble and make things difficult for you." Tong Tong wanted to take the puppy upstairs, but I stopped her and said nicely, "We can't keep pets in the house. Keep in the yard." "No. Uncle Zhou bought it for me. I'm going to sleep with Toffee tonight." She hugged the puppy tightly and took a few steps back. Keeping pets was strictly forbidden by me, and Tong Tong already had a lot of dissatisfaction with me. Not wanting to strain the relationship, I patiently explained, "I'm not telling you to throw it away. Just keep it in the yard. Don't let it into the house." "No, I want to keep it in the house." Because of this dog, her gaze towards me was filled with resentment. "Why not?" "Humph, Dad doesn't love me at all. Uncle Zhou is better than you." She quickly ran upstairs, afraid that I would snatch the dog from her. A strange smell permeated the air. My nose itched, and I sneezed, goosebumps rising all over my body. I looked at Qian coldly. "Don't you know I'm allergic to pet fur? In severe cases, it can cause respiratory infections, even death." This was something the doctor had told her directly when I was hospitalized for allergies after she took me to feed stray cats during our dating period. When we first started dating, Qian was quite indifferent to me. I arranged everything, like what to eat and where to go. In fact, she also felt that I was beneath her. I obeyed her in everything, but she always liked to play tricks on me. For example, knowing that I couldn't eat spicy food, she insisted on taking me to try a super spicy hot pot restaurant. I have a fear of heights, but she coaxed and persuaded me to go bungee jumping. Only about feeding stray cats, I firmly refused. But she said that the way to prove your love for a girl is to do things you're afraid to do for her. In the end, I got sick and was hospitalized with red rashes all over my body, and I had to take medicine for 2 weeks. She held my hand with great guilt. "I'm so sorry. Qin Fei, I thought you were afraid of cats. That's why you didn't dare to get close to stray cats. I didn't know your allergy was so serious." After that, she never dared to casually joke with me again and gradually became warmer to me. Maybe too much time has passed, and she has forgotten how pathetic I looked, lying in a hospital bed with difficulty breathing, trying to prove my love for her. And Qian took out a bottle of anti-allergy medicine from the shopping bag. We passed a pet store, and Tong Tong insisted on going in to have a look. As soon as she acted cute, Zhili bought it for her. Zhou Zhili chimed in, mainly because the child liked it. I felt bad refusing. And Qian put the medicine on a coffee table. "I bought you some allergy medicine. Why don't you just bear with it?" Then, she helped Zhou Zhili carry his luggage upstairs. Looking at the bottle of medicine, I smiled inexplicably. The next morning, 2 copies of the divorce agreement were delivered, and the courier called me. I went downstairs to sign for them and filled in my information. And Qian was sitting in front of the dressing table applying lotion, and I placed the agreement on the dressing table in front of her. She glanced at it casually. "Huh? What's this?" After carefully reading the contents, she first froze, and then her entire face fell. and she sneered at me. I was the one who demanded a divorce so strongly before, and you're the one clinging on, begging me to stay. What's with this carefree act now? Her expression was disdainful. Qin Fei, remember this, I brought up the divorce. You're also someone I don't want. Once you sign, don't you dare regret it. I replied, my biggest regret is marrying you. Sign it. I handed her the pen, and Qian looked impatient as she flipped open the agreement and skimmed through it. Ever since I met her, I knew she was a stubborn girl. She would insist on doing what she believed in, regardless of right or wrong. She wouldn't give up until she hit a dead end. But falling in love with a selfish, hypocritical, and irresponsible man was destined to leave her battered and bruised. To pursue love, she abandoned the family and career she had painstakingly built in this city for 8 years. Whether it was worth it or not, I had no right to judge. I wasn't afraid of the impending death, and I could endure the physical pain. I was just afraid that after I died, she and our daughter would be bullied, cheated out of their property by Zhou Zhili, and left homeless. Although when Qian betrayed me for Zhou Zhili, and I should hate her, I genuinely hoped she could find happiness. I also hoped that Zhou Zhili wouldn't betray in Qian's sincerity this time and toy with her feelings. Suddenly, Tong Tong's scream came from downstairs. Ah! And Qian and I rushed to our daughter's side. Tong Tong was kneeling on the ground, crying. In front of her was a cardboard box, bloodied inside, containing the torn-up corpse of our pet dog. The dog, which was alive and kicking just half an hour ago, had been cruelly killed by someone, its death extremely gruesome. Tong Tong was overly frightened and threw herself into Qian's arms, wailing, "Woo, Milk Candy is dead, Mommy." And Qian covered her eyes, not daring to let her see anymore. She gently hugged her daughter, patting her back to comfort her. Heartbroken, Tong Tong cried incessantly, her shoulders shaking. We've been married for many years, and Qian and I only have this one child, whom we dote on. Tong Tong has always been a bit mischievous, and even the slightest bump or bruise on her makes my heart race. I'm most afraid of her crying. Even if she does something wrong, I can't bear to scold her. Listening to her heart-wrenching cries, my heart ached. I reached out to touch my daughter's hair, wanting to comfort her, but she swatted my hand away. "You killed the puppy, Daddy. It must have been you. There are security cameras at home, and it would be easy to find out who did it." I was just about to explain to my daughter, but in the next second, Tong Tong, her eyes full of hatred, broke free from Qian's embrace and started frantically hitting my legs. "Give it back to me. Give it back. Why did you kill it? I don't want to call you Daddy anymore. You're a bad person. You're a murderer. You didn't like me having a dog, so you secretly killed it. I didn't even spend your money on it. Why did you do that?" Her fists pounded on my legs and arms as she cursed. I knew Tong Tong was heartbroken, so I didn't move, letting her vent for a while. Only after venting her emotions could she calm down. And Qian came over to intervene, pulling our daughter aside, but this only fueled her daughter's anger. "I wish Daddy would die. Then Uncle Zhou will be my new dad. Mommy likes Uncle Zhou too. We don't want to live with you. I hate you. Why don't you just die?" The daughter I've raised for 5 years, speaking such vicious words to me. Her childish voice was like a sharp thorn, piercing my heart. All these years, I've given her everything she wanted, fulfilled all her wishes. If she wanted the stars in the sky, I would have plucked them for her. When Tong Tong was sick with a fever, I would stay up all night with her, telling her fairy tales. When Qian scolded her for doing something wrong, I would hold her in my arms and kneel with her as punishment. No matter how busy I was with work, I would always make time to take her to the amusement park, buy her expensive gifts, and spoil her like a beautiful princess. I didn't ask for her gratitude. I only wished for her happiness. Even if she wasn't my biological daughter, I wouldn't care. Although Qian had an affair with her first love and betrayed our marriage, at least I thought my daughter had some affection for me. Sometimes her innocent words would hurt me, and she would even side with Zhou Zhili, my rival. I just thought she was young and didn't understand, believing that when she grew up, she would know right from wrong. It turns out that in her heart, she already hates me this much, hates me to the point of wishing me dead. and Qian shielded our daughter in her arms, blindly blaming me. Qin Fei, I know you're severely allergic to cat and dog fur, but even if you're upset, you can't just kill the dog. It's terrifying. Tong Tong is traumatized. Tong Tong glared at me angrily. You killed the puppy Uncle Zhou gave me. I won't forgive you. I have a terminal illness and won't live much longer. Soon, I'll be moving out of this heartless home. Let them live with whomever they please. I don't care how they wrong or curse me. They won't need me in the future, and I won't need them either. Just then, Zhou Zhili, returning from the mall with bags of pet snacks and toys, walked into the living room with a smile. He quickly sensed the tense atmosphere. What's with these long faces? Why is Tong Tong crying? I have a terminal illness and won't live much longer. Soon, I'll be moving out of this heartless home. Let them live with whomever they please. I don't care how they wrong or curse me. They won't need me in the future, and I won't need them either. Wah, Uncle Zhou, Tong Tong cried, rushing to Zhou Zhili and hugging his leg. The puppy you gave me is dead, covered in blood, in that cardboard box. Daddy killed it. He's scary. I don't want to live with him anymore. Take me and Mommy away. Zhou Zhili frowned, stroking her face with heartache. Oh dear, how could this happen? You must be terrified. Don't be sad, Tong Tong. Uncle Zhou will bury the puppy with you, so it can go to heaven and be happy in its next life, with a good owner. Zhou Zhili frowned, stroking her face with heartache. Oh dear, how could this happen? You must be terrified. Don't be sad, Tong Tong. Uncle Zhou will bury the puppy with you, so it can go to heaven and be happy in its next life, with a good owner. Tong Tong nodded tearfully. Mitchum. My daughter leaned against that man's shoulder, pitifully recounting her grievances. That heartwarming scene further convinced me that they were the real father and daughter connected by blood. And Qian squatted down to wipe away our daughter's tears. Tong Tong grabbed her hand and placed it on top of Zhou Zhili's. Mommy, Uncle Zhou, promise me we'll always be together, never separated. Okay. With their daughter's assistance, the two lovers, reunited after 8 years of separation, gazed at each other affectionately, their faces brimming with uncontainable joy. And I, standing not far away, coldly observing this scene, felt so out of place. The stomach pain intensified, like a fire burning and corroding my insides. I'd once thought losing in Qian and Tong Tong would ruin me. Seeing them run to him, I wasn't as crushed as expected. Repeated letdowns had numbed me. They wouldn't collapse my world. Cancer would. And Qian handed me a divorce paper copy, eyes devoid of guilt or reluctance. Had you known, you wouldn't have forced this marriage, she replied flatly. I needed new love to heal old wounds. You couldn't find better than me in your class, so we wed. Qin Fei, you don't love me. Or else, your 3rd year of marriage wouldn't. Her phone rang. Cutting her off, I missed her last words. Hello, Uncle. Her voice rose. You're coming? Tomorrow, Got it, we'll talk then. Hanging up, she mused, then said, Uncle's had heart issues since 2 years ago. Can't handle shocks. He might not take our divorce well. I first met her uncle at her parents' funeral, then our wedding. After the ceremony, amid the bustling banquet, he pulled me aside for a heartfelt talk. He said after her parents' deaths and bankruptcy, friends and her first love abandoned her. The stress nearly broke her. His life's wish was her happiness, so he sternly entrusted me to care for her, never hurt her, or he'd haunt me. Yet, I was the one forsaken. My uncle's flight was due to arrive at 10 in the morning, and Qian had booked a restaurant in advance. I didn't plan to attend the gathering. The procedures at the sanatorium were all complete, and I could go there anytime. All I had to do was go to the company, sign the contract with the acquiring party's representative, and I could take my luggage directly to the sanatorium. Before leaving, I stood by the car, watching Qian, Tong Tong, and Zhou Zhili chatting and laughing in the back seat. Their everyday interactions looked more like a happy and harmonious family. The passenger seat was reserved for me. I opened the car door, then closed it again. And Qian looked at me with displeasure and urged, What are you standing there for? Get in the car. I lied. There's something urgent at the company. You guys go ahead. I'll be there later. Busy with work again. Suit yourself. I'll send you the address of the private room. Don't be too late. After this parting, I would likely never see them again. As the car was about to start, Tong Tong inadvertently met my gaze. I smiled and waved at her, but she turned her face away expressionlessly as if facing a stranger. Only when she looked at Zhou Zhili did her bright smile reappear. I wasn't angry, but I suddenly felt a sense of emotion as I turned away. Married for 8 years, and Qian and I didn't even have a formal goodbye. This time, I was really leaving them. From now on, my life or death had nothing to do with them, and I wouldn't interfere in their lives. I took my documents, grabbed my suitcase, and left the room. Hearing the commotion, the housekeeper came up curiously and asked, "Are you going on a business trip? Madam has relatives coming today, and I've already cleaned the guest room." I hesitated for a moment and lied. "Yes, I'm going on a business trip, and I'm not sure when I'll be back. Please take good care of Qian and the child." The housekeeper smiled and agreed, seeing me to the door, reminding me to drive carefully. An hour later, I walked into a sanatorium in the suburbs. The staff checked my ID, verified the information, and arranged for me to stay in a single room. According to the regulations, I needed to undergo a full medical examination. As I walked down the hallway, reading my report, a quarrel caught my attention. A little girl in a white dress stood with her head down, nervously picking at the hem of her clothes, her face full of distress. Her mother was arguing fiercely with an elderly woman. Onlookers explained the situation to me. The girl had been born with leukemia. Her father had abandoned them, and her mother had remarried, leaving the girl in a sanatorium. A couple of days ago, the doctors said the girl wouldn't live much longer. The mother wanted to bring her child home, but her mother-in-law refused, threatening that if she dared bring the little bastard back, she would make her son divorce her. Life is unpredictable. I hadn't intended to get involved, but then the little girl looked up at me. Her timid, helpless, and bewildered eyes seemed to sense another abandonment. Her appearance reminded me of my own time in the orphanage. I, too, had experienced a childhood filled with the same fear and trepidation. The subscriber you dialed is powered off. Please try again later. And Qian stood at the entrance of the private dining room, calling Qin Fei, who was still nowhere to be seen. She couldn't get through and felt puzzled. Even when Qin Fei was busy, he would always reply promptly. Now, he wasn't responding to messages, and his phone went straight to voicemail. She didn't understand what was going on, feeling ignored, and Qian was a little angry and blamed Qin Fei for not valuing her family. Divorcing him seemed like a wise decision indeed. Zhou Zhili was her first love, who had abandoned her to go abroad years ago. Because of this, her uncle had always held a grudge against him. Every time his name was mentioned, her uncle would fly into a rage and curse him vehemently. Her uncle always compared Qin Fei favorably and was pleased that she had found a good husband. He advised her to forget her irresponsible first love and focus on her marriage. She had been worried that her uncle would give Zhou Zhili a hard time today, afraid they would clash, and hesitated to invite him. But Zhou Zhili was insistent. He wanted to gain her uncle's support and be with her, no matter what. He said that as long as her uncle was willing to forgive him, accept him, and give him a chance to redeem himself, he would endure any scolding or beating, even kneel and kowtow. His sincerity won Qian over even more. In contrast, Qin Fei, who was completely preoccupied with work and even dared to be late to the elders' welcoming banquet, was becoming more and more irritating to Qian. Qian put away her phone and turned back into the private room. She didn't know that Qin Fei had already left home and blocked her and their daughter's contact information. She still planned to settle the score with him when she got home. At the dinner table, upon seeing Zhou Zhili, her uncle kept a sullen face the entire time. He deliberately ignored the other man's toasts and disdainfully tossed aside the expensive gifts he offered. He spoke very little, the question he asked most frequently being, "When is Qin Fei coming?" Tong Tong, tired of hearing it, rolled her eyes and mumbled, "Dad's not coming. We'll eat by ourselves. Anyway, Uncle Zhou will be my new dad from now on." Upon hearing this, her uncle pinched her cheek and then scolded Qian, Look at the good daughter you've raised. What kind of things are you teaching her to say? I made a special trip here. Your husband isn't present. What do you mean by bringing this man to see me? You're entangled with your ex, and Qin Fei can tolerate that? If he gets angry and divorces you, you'll regret it. Whether intentionally or not, Zhou Zhili interjected, they're already divorced. What? Her uncle was so shocked, he almost lost his breath. The meal ended coldly and quietly, and her uncle remained silent on the way home. When unloading the luggage from the car trunk, he refused Zhou Zhili's help and didn't give Qian a pleasant look either. Once inside the living room, he said to Qian, I bought a ticket for tomorrow. I'm leaving tomorrow. Don't call me uncle anymore. You're on your own. Do as you please. And Qian anxiously explained, there's a reason why Qin Fei and I divorced. Uncle, you don't know anything. How can you blame it all on me? If anyone's at fault, it's Qin Fei. I didn't do anything wrong to him. You. Her uncle's expression changed. He clutched his chest and showed a pained expression. And Qian quickly helped him to the sofa, poured him a glass of warm water, and took a bottle of blood pressure medication from his pocket for him to take. Hearing a commotion downstairs, the housekeeper came over, and Qian asked irritably, Where's Qin Fei? He's not back yet. Sir is on a business trip. Glancing at the living room wall, she noticed the wedding photo that had hung there for years was gone, and couldn't help but wonder, where's the wedding photo? The housekeeper shook her head, indicating she didn't know. And Qian looked around and noticed several family photos on the TV cabinet were also missing. Did Qin Fei say anything before he left? When will he be back? The housekeeper shook her head again, and Qian felt a sudden tightening in her chest and ran upstairs to the bedroom. All of Qin Fei's belongings were gone. The wardrobe was empty. If he was just on a business trip, would he need to pack up so thoroughly? She searched the entire house, but couldn't find a single trace of Qin Fei. Even one of the pillows on the double bed was missing. His departure was like he had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind. She dialed his number several times, but it went straight to voicemail. Unwilling to give up, and Qian tried calling from the housekeeper's phone. The call went through, but rang for a long time with no answer. He blocked me, and Qian furrowed her brow, furious. What does he mean? Leaving without a word. He's acting like a child. I told him my uncle was coming to stay today. Is he doing this on purpose to spite me? If he has the guts, he shouldn't come back. He could just die out there, leaving so abruptly. Maybe he moved in with one of his mistresses. 3 years into their marriage, she had unexpectedly discovered Qin Fei's infidelity. It began with an anonymous text message containing a photo of a hand resting on Qin Fei's shoulder. It was a fair, slender hand with manicured nails. From his profile, she could tell Qin Fei was slightly drunk, his face flushed. The background of the photo looked like some sort of business club. At first, she tried to convince herself not to worry, thinking it was normal to go to such places for business. Later, she noticed lipstick on the back of Qin Fei's shirt collar when he came home at night, and a strange scratch on his neck. Her intuition told her that her husband was cheating. When she was about to file for divorce, she discovered she was pregnant. After graduating from university, to escape the pain of a previous relationship, she hastily accepted Qin Fei's confession and married him in days. Now, because of this unexpected pregnancy, she endured her husband's affair. It wasn't until Zhou Zhili, whom she hadn't seen in years, called and asked to meet her that her long-suppressed emotions finally erupted. This time, she didn't want to worry about anything. She just wanted to think about herself and make a choice for her own happiness. She always believed she had no feelings for Qin Fei, and Zhou Zhili was the only man she truly loved. Even when signing the divorce agreement, she felt no reluctance, only the joy of regaining her freedom. But Qin Fei suddenly disappeared without a word, clearing away all traces of himself from their home. For some reason, she felt extremely panicked. She consoled herself that Qin Fei was trying to intimidate her, making her look bad in front of her uncle. The house was valuable. Qin Fei couldn't just abandon it. And the company, he had devoted so many years of effort and dedication to it. How could he just walk away? Her uncle, sitting on the sofa, had taken his medicine and his complexion gradually improved. He sighed helplessly. Even for the sake of the child, you shouldn't have impulsively divorced him. I've seen how good Qin Fei has been to you all these years. And Qian was already irritated because she couldn't reach Qin Fei. Hearing her uncle blame her, she felt even more wronged. Good to me? He just married a young and beautiful wife to boost his own ego out of male vanity. Her uncle's voice was weak. He's been kind to you. How can you? I didn't ask for a penny in the divorce. And I gave him 8 years of my youth. What do I still owe him? On her wedding day, her uncle had earnestly advised her. Finding a man who truly loved her wasn't easy, and she mustn't let Qin Fei down, or she would definitely regret it. She clearly hadn't heeded his advice. Her uncle glanced at Tong Tong and Zhou Zhili beside him, and slowly said, "The year you were in your 3rd year of university, your parents passed away. I took out all my savings to help pay off the debts, but it still wasn't enough. I was preparing to sell my house, but Qin Fei came to the funeral with the money and found me. Later, when you two got married, I recognized him. He asked me to keep it a secret for the time being, afraid you'd feel burdened." Zhou Zhili's pupils abruptly dilated upon hearing this. So it was Qin Fei who had kindly helped Qian pay off her debts. Damn it. Why did it have to be him? What a coincidence. Her uncle pointed at Zhou Zhili angrily. You kept saying this man loves you, but where was he when you were facing difficulties and couldn't go on? You were at the same university with so many mutual friends. Could he really not know about the changes in your family? If he wanted to help you, he would have done so long ago. And Qian's face was full of disbelief. She frowned and silently turned her gaze to Zhou Zhili. Qian, I caught in his lie. Zhou Zhili stammered, unable to explain, and quickly admitted his mistake. He apologized humbly, holding in Qian's hand. I'm sorry, Qian, I didn't mean to lie to you. If I had known it was Qin Fei, I wouldn't have lied. About that 200,000 yuan you gave me later, I bought a gift for your uncle with some of it, and I'll return the rest to you. Please don't be angry with me, okay? It wasn't about the money at all. Qin Fei had clarified the matter of the money before, but she hadn't believed him and had retorted sarcastically. After that, Qin Fei had never mentioned it again. It was hard to imagine how Qin Fei felt after hearing her words and how he viewed her. She was like a fool, completely played by this man. And Qian was a little disappointed in Zhou Zhili and ashamed of herself. She shook off Zhou Zhili's hand, saying she needed to calm down. Qin Fei wasn't there, and she was in a mess right now. She had no interest in Zhou Zhili's hypocritical face. When Qin Fei returned, she should apologize to him. Next morning, and Qian reached for my side cold. No familiar figure, her heart hollowed. At breakfast, Uncle threatened to fly home if she didn't find me. She called my assistant. Politely, he said I'd sold the company, no longer there. Where is he? She yelled. He hung up. Had I fled for good? No, he wouldn't. The house was in his name. He'd not sold it, meaning he'd return. Day 2, maybe he was traveling, clearing his head. She'd wait. He'd come back. All day, she fretted. Tong Tong and Zhou Zhili spoke. She zoned out, fixated on me. Unable to wait, she called my friends, colleagues. Every number, asking if they'd seen me, knew my whereabouts. All said no. My closest buddy mentioned a recent meetup. I'd invited him, odd for a busy family man. I'd been off, saying goodbyes, thanks. After drinks, I'd puked twice, pale alarming. Asked about a hospital, I'd laughed it off. No contacts since. No leads, she sighed. Qin Fei's an orphan. No kin. Even his best friend's clueless. Where could he go alone? A trip was fine, but settling elsewhere, never returning. What then? The thought of possibly never seeing Qin Fei again suddenly frightened her. To force him to agree to the divorce, she had lied, claiming Tong Tong wasn't his daughter. She had even brazenly brought her first love home. Qin Fei must have been heartbroken, utterly despairing, to choose to leave without a word. She had caused this. This was what she had wanted. But why wasn't she happy now that she was divorced and free? Her uncle, her first love, and her daughter were all by her side. Yet she felt empty inside. When Qin Fei was around, She hadn't felt any particular attachment to him, always treating her legal husband as if he were invisible. She'd hug him when she was happy, scowl at him when she wasn't. Qin Fei was healthy, rarely sick, but when she was ill and suffering, he would cancel all his work to be with her. After Tong Tong was born, the doctor said she had postpartum depression tendencies and needed her family's patient guidance and care. Because of this, Qin Fei had doted on her, worked tirelessly, and catered to her every whim, never talking back even when scolded. But subconsciously, she believed that his meticulous care was his way of atoning for having an affair. The more he tried to prove his love for her, the more suspicious she became. She didn't confront him directly about the affair, because once those words were spoken, once the pretense was shattered, their marriage would instantly crumble. Her daughter needed a happy family, so she endured. Qin Fei also endured her coldness. It wasn't until Zhou Zhili, this other man, appeared that Qin Fei finally broke, realizing he couldn't keep up the charade and needed to leave. And Qian was indignant. Qin Fei was the one who had made the mistake, yet she was the one left behind, the pitiful one. Now you know how to cry? What were you doing before? Her uncle's reprimand made Qian realize she was actually crying. I'm not crying. She wiped her tears, stubbornly insisting. When Qin Fei comes back, I won't let him off the hook. That jerk, if anyone's leaving, it should be me. I'm not the one being abandoned. Her uncle scoffed. If you had treated him even a little better, he wouldn't have left. He'll come back. And Qian cried out, collapsing in sobs, covering her face with her hands. Who does he think he is, abandoning me and our daughter without a word? Disappearing without even saying goodbye. What kind of behavior is that? While she was grieving, her phone rang. It was the cemetery management office. They said the plot she had reserved was highly sought after due to its good feng shui, and only 2 spots remained. A couple had died in a car accident, and their family wanted to bury them together, so they were asking if Qian would be willing to switch to a different location. They would offer preferential treatment. I haven't bought a burial plot. You have the wrong number. And Qian wiped her tears, feeling unlucky. Oh, it was reserved by your husband over a month ago. We couldn't reach him on his mobile number, so we had to contact you. And Qian froze for a moment, then yelled into the phone. Are you crazy? My husband is alive and well. Why would he buy a burial plot? Call again, and I'll call the police. After a moment's thought, and Qian dialed the emergency number. Hello, yes. My husband has been missing for 2 days. That's right, I can't contact him at all. If you have any information, please let me know immediately. The little girl living in the next room ran to the window at the end of the hallway every morning. She stared intently at the hospital's main entrance, watching for most of the day. Her name was Chong Lu, and she was the same age as Tong Tong. She was waiting for her mother, but that day, after arguing with her in-laws, her mother was taken away and never seen again. Chong Lu was diagnosed with leukemia at birth, and her father abandoned them. Not long after, her mother remarried. Her new in-laws refused to take in a burden, so on her wedding day, her mother abandoned the 1-year-old Chong Lu at the entrance of the nursing home. The director took pity on her, and the nursing home had provided her with free room and board for the past few years. She had surgery last year, but it was unsuccessful. Because the treatment was too painful, the doctors gave up. Like me, Chong Lu only had 2 or 3 months left to live. She usually stayed in a shared ward with elderly patients suffering from dementia. The caregivers complained about the noise there, but this wasn't a charity. Providing free room and board was already generous. I requested that the management move Chong Lu to the room next to mine. It was spacious, comfortable, and quiet, perfect for people like us quietly waiting for death. It would be good for 2 dying people to have some company. The day she moved in with her pillow, I met her in the hallway and greeted her, but Chong doesn't like to talk, and she had no expression. The caregiver said she only talks and smiles when her mother comes. Because her mother has been secretly visiting her these past few years, buying her treats, she recognizes her mother's face. At noon, I saw her standing on a stool, motionless, leaning on the windowsill looking outside. She won't come, I said softly, walking behind her. Let's go eat. When that woman was dragged away by her in-laws, she cried and held her daughter's hand, repeatedly saying, "Mommy, sorry. You have to take care of yourself." The caregiver brought 2 lunches and put them in my room. Previously, they were delivered separately. Changlu needs to take medicine every day, but she hasn't been willing to take it lately, and she's been deliberately starving herself. This has worsened her condition, and she's had 2 nosebleeds. The caregiver asked me to help supervise her meals and give her the medicine an hour after she eats. Looking at the abundant lunch on the table, Changlu didn't touch her chopsticks. I opened a candy jar and took out 2 gummy bears for her. After eating them, her eyes lit up, and she looked at me with a hint of anticipation. "Eat your food, and these are all yours." This brand of gummy bears is Tong Tong's favorite snack. I bought some online, thinking that children's tastes should be pretty similar. Changlu obediently lowered her head and ate more than half of the food. I gave her the candy box. Just then, there was a knock on the door. I went to open it and saw Qian with red-rimmed eyes and Tong Tong, looking aggrieved, calling me daddy. How did you find this place?" Before I could finish the sentence, Qian excitedly hugged me. Her breathing was very rapid and heavy, as if she had rushed all the way here. "Qin Fei, I finally found you." Tears glistened in Qian's eyes. I didn't understand why she had come all this way with our child to find me, or why she was crying when she saw me. Qian grabbed my arm, as if she was afraid I would run away. "Do you know how worried I've been these past few days? I thought you were missing. I even called the police. But what are you doing at a sanatorium? And you even bought yourself a burial plot." She didn't give me time to explain. She pulled me and was about to leave, a smile on her face. "This place can't be as comfortable as home. Let's go home first. We can talk about everything at home." Tong Tong also came over and grabbed the corner of my clothes, obediently saying, "Daddy, let's go home together." Their uncharacteristic intimacy made me uncomfortable. I gently pushed Qian's hand away. "I'm not going back. And we're divorced." After hearing this, Qian's smile instantly froze. As she was caught in an awkward situation, unsure how to face me, she suddenly noticed Changlu behind me. Without a word, I moved into the sanatorium with a sickly little girl by my side. Qian's expression shifted from hesitation to gradual anger. She looked at me in disbelief. "You even have an illegitimate daughter? Is it because of this child that you came here? You're coming back with me right now." Her tone was forceful as she tried to pull me away. I impatiently shook her off and told her to leave. In an instant, Qian's emotions collapsed, and she couldn't help but cry. She wiped away her tears aggrievedly, sobbing, "You haven't contacted me at all these past few days. I was so worried about you. I asked so many people, and they all said they hadn't seen you. I thought something had happened to you alone outside. And it turns out you just ran off to a sanatorium to take care of your illegitimate daughter." She glared at Changlu with jealousy and resentment. I wanted to explain, but seeing Qian's tear-stained face, I chose to remain silent. The day I found out Tong Tong wasn't my biological daughter, I suffered a blow far greater than hers. This feeling of being betrayed by the closest person, of being so angry you grind your teeth, yet feeling utterly helpless, she was finally experiencing it. I considered it a kind of psychological revenge, and I didn't immediately clarify my relationship with Changlu. "You're not welcome here. Please leave." I thought she would angrily slap me and then storm off. Unexpectedly, Qian's raised hand slowly came to rest on my face, caressing it with extraordinary tenderness. She stared at me blankly. It seemed she had a lot to say to me, but didn't know where to start. "Can we talk about this at home?" she asked in a pleading tone. "If you're worried about this child, you can take her back with you. I can help take care of her. I don't want to know who this child's mother is, or how you met that woman. I don't care about any of that. I'm just not used to you being away from me for so long. From the time we met until now, whenever there was a conflict, I was always the first to back down. The first time she cried and apologized to me was the day she wanted to divorce me and elope with her first love. She came to find me and asked me to go back, not because she had a change of heart about me. It was because she wasn't used to me being away from her for so long. She was used to me always complying with her, used to relying on me, used to having me by her side no matter what happened. In this completely unequal relationship, she was always so high and mighty, and the little bit of kindness and tenderness she showed me felt like charity. I know she looked down on me from the bottom of her heart. She and Zhou Zhili were a princess and a young master from wealthy families, while I was just a poor boy who grew up in an orphanage. Being able to marry her was a blessing I earned in a past life. It's just that I don't cherish this blessing anymore. Her and her daughter, this failed marriage, and all the feelings we've accumulated over the years, I don't want any of it. I just want them to disappear from my sight quickly, stop bothering me, and let me live out the last few months of my life in peace. What exactly do you want? I asked helplessly. When I was around, you were annoyed just looking at me, crying and screaming for a divorce, wanting to pursue true love. Now that I'm gone, I've left as you wished, and you're forcing me to go back. She hurriedly apologized to me, hoping to win me back. I was wrong. Qin Fei, can you just consider my fault this time? I'm sorry, I apologize to you. If she was apologizing for Zhou Zhili and Tong Tong and the verbal abuse she inflicted on me recently, this apology of hers is way too late. The moment Qian signed the divorce papers and decided to terminate our marriage, my relationship with her came to an end. Looking at Qian's humble appearance, I sneered. You came all this way just to say sorry to me? If there's nothing else, then leave quickly. Tong Tong pleaded for Qian. Dad, don't be mad at Mom. She's worried about you. She can't sleep at home, and she calls your name in her dreams. I heard it. Tong Tong hugged my leg, looking at me pitifully. I don't want to live with Uncle Zhou anymore. I like being with Dad more. Don't leave me and Mom. I'll be good and listen to you from now on. I won't throw tantrums anymore, and I won't keep pets, okay? It doesn't matter to me who you like. If you don't leave, I'll call the doctor and security. Seeing my indifference, Qian hurriedly explained. I regret it. I regret divorcing you. Honey, can we start over? Qian and I had been married for over 8 years, and she had never taken me seriously. We had only been apart for a few days, and her attitude toward me had completely changed. She confessed that in all the years she had been married to me, she had never forgotten Zhou Zhili. He was her first love, her white moonlight, the first man she had ever deeply loved. Zhou Zhili was sent abroad to study by his parents, and he told many people, but she was the last to know. When she found out, she was very disappointed in him. She didn't cling to him, and they broke up peacefully. Later, her family encountered financial difficulties, and she didn't want to burden her uncle, so she planned to drop out of school and work. Fortunately, I helped her at that time, so she could finish her studies without worries and find a decent job as a photographer after graduation. Otherwise, she wouldn't know where she would be making a living now, or what she would have become. Did Uncle tell you everything? I asked calmly, and Qian looked at me and said weakly, if you had admitted it earlier, maybe I wouldn't have divorced you. She meant that although she didn't love me, she understood gratitude. If it were purely for repaying a debt, she would have chosen to endure this marriage and continue to be with me. Perhaps she would have been nicer to me, more affectionate. She was regretting it, but I felt fortunate for it. Luckily, I didn't reveal the truth. Otherwise, how would I have seen your true colors? For these 8 years, you've tried hard to play the perfect wife, and everyone around you has praised you. But your gentleness, virtue, and thoughtfulness were never for me. I looked down at her empty right hand. You only wore the wedding ring I gave you once, on our wedding day. I asked you why you didn't wear it anymore, and you said you didn't like the style. She didn't dislike the ring design. She just disliked me. I gently took her right hand. Too much time had passed. I could no longer feel the burning heat from her palm like I did when I first held it. At our wedding ceremony in the hotel lobby, I held her hand like this, placing the ring on her finger as our friends looked on. That ceremony symbolized that from then on, she belonged to me and I belonged to her. I swore to myself that no matter what difficulties we faced in the future, I would never let go of her hand. I also believed that she would stay with me, never leaving my side. I believed that as long as I work hard enough, one day I would replace Zhou Zhili in her heart. But she had already given her heart to someone else, leaving me with only an empty, emotionless shell. I'm too tired, and Qian. I don't have the strength to hold on to you anymore. I slowly released her hand. Let's end this. No, I don't want it to end like this. She cried as she apologized. Can you forgive me, Qin Fei? I was immature before, too selfish. I only cared about my own feelings, neglecting and hurting you. It wasn't until you left home that I finally realized how important you are to me. I realized I love you. This belated affection was jarring. I tried to hold on to her so many times. If she had shown even a sliver of reluctance, we wouldn't have ended up like this. It's too late. I sighed, feeling a sense of release. We can't go back to the way things were, and I don't love you anymore. I looked back at Changla, who had been neglected for a long time. She sat quietly, hugging her candy jar, looking bewildered. I smiled at her, then said seriously to Qian, as you can see, I have my own family now. I don't need you anymore. So please go back. Don't bother me and my daughter again. And Qian shook her head, unable to accept it. No, don't say that. Qin Fei, I know you're still angry with me. This can't be what you really feel. Can't we just call it even? I don't mind that you have an illegitimate daughter, and you shouldn't mind my past with Zhou Zhili. Also, I want to tell you, you are actually Tong Tong's biological father. I lied to you before. She lied about Tong Tong's parentage just to force me to agree to the divorce. She knew she was the guilty party in the marriage and was afraid I would take custody of our daughter, so she resorted to this. After hearing her explanation, I didn't know whether to call her stupid or despicable. I should have felt relieved to find out the truth about my daughter's parentage. But when I saw Tong Tong's innocent face, the image of her previous verbal abuse towards me suddenly appeared in my mind. Daddy. Tong Tong raised her hands wanting a hug, and I instinctively stepped back to avoid it. My daughter was stunned, and her arms slowly dropped. Her innocent expression was very hurt. These past few days at the nursing home, my mood has calmed down a lot. With Chang Li's company, it's like having a new family, so I haven't felt lonely. If it weren't for Qian and Tong Tong's sudden appearance today, I would have almost forgotten about them. It's rare that I've finally seen things clearly and freed myself from a failed family relationship. I really don't want to step back into that cage, nor do I want to be entangled with them. Whose daughter Tong Tong is doesn't matter to me anymore. Also, I won't go back with you. The house was bought when we got married, so I'll leave it for you to live in. And Qian continued to plead desperately. I beg you, Qin Fei, come back with me, okay? If you don't like Zhou Zhili, then let him move out. I can guarantee that I will never have anything to do with him again. It's all my fault. I didn't know how to cherish this relationship. I took advantage of your love and indulgence and did many things that hurt you. I really know I was wrong now. As long as you're willing to take me back, I'll change everything. Every word she said was sincere, promising to forget Zhou Zhili, to be devoted to me, and to be the good wife I always wanted. She even raised her fingers and swore a vicious oath. If she ever betrayed me again, she would die a miserable death. I listened to her vow in silence, my heart unmoved, and I even felt like laughing as I listened. I didn't believe a word she said, nor did I have the patience to listen any further. I believe you truly regret it, and everything I said just now was also sincere. This isn't something that can be salvaged with a few changes from you. To reach this point, we can only blame it on fate. Is this really how it ends for us? She looked at me unwillingly. I answered expressionlessly, yes. And Qian held back her tears, wiped them away with her sleeve, and took Tong Tong's hand. Let's go. Tong Tong's expression was extremely anxious, and she started throwing a tantrum. I don't want to go. I want to go home with Dad. I don't want to be separated from him. Why does Dad have another daughter? I'm your mom's only child. You don't want Mom? Don't you want me either? Tong Tong glared at Chang Li behind me, recognizing the candy jar in Chang Li's hand. It was the snack I often bought for her. But now, the candy jar had fallen into someone else's hands, and even her father was being taken away. She couldn't help but burst into tears. Wah, I don't want to be separated from Dad. Mom, please talk to him. It's all because you insisted on letting Uncle Zhou move and that Dad left. Dad used to dote on me so much. It's all your fault. He doesn't even want me anymore, Wah. Tong Tong cried and made a fuss, and Qian had to put in a lot of effort, scolding her a few times to drag her away. When they left, my ears were finally quiet. I breathed a sigh of relief, turned to look at Chong, Liz sitting to the side, and worried if she had been frightened. She stared into my eyes thoughtfully, nervously biting her lip, and after much hesitation, she finally spoke. Are you really my dad? Her eyes clearly held a hint of anticipation. I was about to deny it. Then I remembered she, like me, was about to die. Chong Li's mother had already decided to give up on her, and perhaps would never come to see her again. No one knew who the child's father was, or whether he was alive or dead. I was also abandoned by my parents when I was very young. I don't remember my parents' faces, nor do I understand why I was abandoned. But I do remember, during my years in the orphanage, my greatest wish was to one day see my parents and be taken home by them. Perhaps it was our shared experience of suffering that made me feel a sense of compassion and pity for her, even if it was a well-intentioned lie. In the last part of her short life, I could try to take on the role of her father and make up for the warmth she was missing. I nodded. She asked, doubtfully, then why did you only appear now? I sat down opposite her and explained, because I had another family, the mother and daughter you just saw. They were my wife and daughter, though not anymore. She didn't resent me for disappearing for so long, but instead looked worried. Are you going to leave soon? Like Mom, go back to your own home. I won't leave, I smiled. I will stay here and be with you. She looked at me blankly, put down the candy jar she was holding, and walked around the table to me. I smiled and opened my arms, and she threw herself into my arms and hugged me tightly. I have a dad too. I'm not an unwanted orphan. Although I couldn't see the expression on her face, I knew she was smiling. When it was time for her to take her medicine, I poured a glass of warm water as usual and put the pills on a spoon to feed her. The first few times, she was very resistant. I lied to her that if she took her medicine obediently, her mother would come to take her home when she recovered. This method later stopped working, so I bought gummy bears to coax her. But today Chong Lu was very cooperative. She took the medicine without me urging her and drank a few sips of water from the cup herself. After she finished drinking, she wiped her mouth and said with a smile that if she took her medicine on time, she could live a few more days. And I could stay with her for a few more days. Because of my company as her father, she no longer spent her days at the window at the end of the hallway, staring at the gate, hoping her mother would come to visit. She lay in bed for a nap, and I tucked her in. Out of the blue, I asked, "Is there anywhere you really want to go? Or anything you want to do?" Chong Li thought for a moment. "I want to go to an amusement park. The kind with lots of toys. I've only seen them on TV." I suggested. "Then let's go to the amusement park tomorrow." "Really?" She smiled happily, raising her pinky finger. "Let's pinky swear." She said she wanted to hold my hand while she slept because she was afraid I wouldn't be there when she woke up. Her mother used to leave secretly while she was sleeping every time she visited. She also said that she hadn't actually been asleep many times, and after her mother left, she would hug her blanket and cry for a long time. "I won't leave," I said, stroking her hair. "Sleep." I took Chong Lu to the amusement park and took photos of her. Looking at her, who was around the same age, I remembered accompanying Tong Tong and Qian here. I was always the one taking their pictures, but I was rarely in those photos. The only few family photos we had were taken by the nanny on Tong Tong's birthday. That's why I didn't feel a thing when I burned those photos. Chong Lu stood next to a large doll statue, and I was finding the right angle with my phone. Suddenly, she ran over and tugged at my clothes. "I want to take a picture with Dad." Her face was pale, but she smiled brightly. That way, even if I'm not here, Dad can look at my picture and remember me every day. I squatted down to her level and flipped the camera. She hugged my neck tightly and pressed her forehead against mine. Looking at the two heads, one big and one small on the screen, I smiled faintly and captured the moment. While holding my hand and walking on the road, Chongla looked up at me curiously and asked, "Was that very pretty Annie someone Dad really liked?" "She used to be," I replied. She asked how I met Qian and why we separated. Why was the pretty Annie crying that day, but I was so cold to her. After hesitating for a while, I told her a story from the past. A very, very long story. I first learned in Qian's name at the freshman welcoming ceremony when I entered university. At that time, and Qian went on stage as a representative of the new students. Her confidence, elegance, and poise not only attracted many new students in the audience, but also deeply attracted me. She was in the sky, and I was on the ground, a light that someone like me could never reach. I liked her, but I didn't expect her to see me or respond to me in any way. During my university years, I always silently paid attention to Qian. She was a beautiful, rich, and excellent student with countless admirers. Later, I heard some rumors that she was with Zhou Zhili, a son from a wealthy family. They were a talented and beautiful couple, a perfect match, and quickly became the model couple on campus. But good things don't last forever. The departure of her first love, the decline of her family, the death of her parents, these successive blows gradually crushed Qian. I found that the once bright and dazzling her had disappeared. She became withdrawn, fragile, and easily hurt. I always hoped that the free and happy her would return. I helped her pay off her debts, took care of her in every aspect of her life, confessed my love to her, proposed to her, and encouraged her to persist in her photography work. Everything I did was to help her find that confident and shining self again. Before, I thought that as long as I loved her, it was enough. I accepted that she didn't love me and that she had another man in her heart. However, the fact proved that unilateral love and effort were not only tormenting myself, but also tormenting her. Our love was wrong, and separating early was the best ending. After listening to my rambling, Chang casually asked, "If that auntie doesn't live well after leaving you, will Dad be very sad?" I pondered for a moment and said, "If she can't even be responsible for herself and knowingly jumps into a trap, no one can help her." After a whole day of fun, Changle and I returned to the sanatorium, chatting and laughing. Holding Changle's hand, I bumped into Qian in the hallway, standing anxiously at her door with her bag. Zhou Zhili and I were completely over this time, were the first words Qian said to me. She was glad she had finally seen the light and cut off this toxic relationship. Today, she was wearing a formal work outfit, and after just one day, she looked radiant. It had been a long time since I'd seen that determined and steady look in her eyes and that bright smile on her face. I contacted my supervisor at my old company, and I'm going back to work next week. After thinking it over, I still prefer photography. "That's great," I replied. She glanced at Changle, who I was holding by the hand, and for a moment, a faint sadness flashed in her eyes. Tong Tong starts school in September at the city's affiliated elementary school. Would you like to see her off together? I hesitated, but still decided to decline. "No, I don't think so. She has you. No, you're important too." Perhaps my indifferent attitude inadvertently provoked her, because Qian reacted strongly. She told me righteously, "You are Tong Tong's father, the most important person in her life. Our daughter needs me, and she needs you too. She's just a little willful sometimes and doesn't always express her feelings well. Actually, she's just like me. She cares about you a lot. Qin Fei, even if you can't be by her side in the future, she will always remember you." She changed the subject, adding, "Remember your kindness to her. She said she came here today to let me know that even without me, she could strive to live a good life. But she still hoped that I could move back in with her and our daughter. She promised me that she would come to visit Changle and me every weekend. Just like I always gave her a bouquet of flowers on our date days, she would bring me a bouquet next time we met. She promised to use her actions to show me that she was truly sorry and had changed, until I let go of my resentment toward her and accepted her again. She would keep pestering me, and Qian understood that Chang Lu was my soft spot. She spoke kindly to Chang Lu and asked her name. She tentatively asked Chang Lu if she would like to move into a big house with her father and her. She would take the place of her mother and take good care of her. Chang Lu shook her head and politely replied, "Thank you, Auntie, but I already have my own mother. I don't need a second one." And Qian didn't force her. and hugged Changlu before leaving. After that, every Saturday morning, and Qian would come as promised with Tong Tong. Because she came so often, and because Qian was tall, beautiful, and very enthusiastic, the people of the sanatorium quickly got to know her. Occasionally, a few gossipy old men and women would inquire about my relationship with Qian. Tong Tong no longer felt hostile towards Changlu, and when she came, she specially bought a large bag of snacks and gave her a teddy bear. The two children of the same age easily played together, and their relationship became closer and closer. It's just that Changlu's illness worried me a little. A couple of days ago, the doctor gave Changlu a checkup and was surprised to find that her condition had stabilized somewhat. But in order to treat her leukemia, a suitable bone marrow match was needed. During a casual chat, the doctor happened to mention the surgery last year. The reason that surgery failed was because the volunteer for the bone marrow transplant had changed their mind and run away. And that person was Changlu's gambling addict father. It is said that after the match was successful, the man agreed to save his daughter and swindled a sum of money from Changlu's mother, and then disappeared. If Changlu's biological father could be found, maybe we could try again. My illness is incurable, but Changlu still has a glimmer of hope. This news, more than my own survival, made me excited. So, the next time Qian came, I asked her for help. She had been a photographer at a large company for so many years and had met media workers from all walks of life. Finding an ordinary person through mass media and the internet was not a particularly difficult task. I will contact my colleagues for help, don't worry. The most important thing for you now is to rest well and get better. She sat on the edge of the bed and peeled an apple for me. I looked at her. After a long silence, I finally asked, "Do you know everything?" "What?" She pretended to be confused. I had no choice but to be direct. The fact that I have late-stage stomach cancer and I'm about to die. "Did you already know?" Her apple-peeling motion stopped, and her eyes instantly turned red. "When did you find out?" She answered truthfully, "It was the first day I came to the sanatorium to find you. You chased me away, and as I was leaving, I overheard the nurses talking." Her apple-peeling motion stopped, and her eyes instantly turned red. "When did you find out?" She answered truthfully, "It was the first day I came to the sanatorium to find you. You chased me away, and as I was leaving, I overheard the nurses talking. They said that the newly moved-in Mr. Qin looked quite strong, but unexpectedly had a terminal illness. And Changlu, poor 5-year-old girl, sick since birth, she hasn't been able to go to school, write, or enjoy anything, and she's about to die." And Qian followed them and asked for clarification. Only then did she find out that I had late-stage stomach cancer and only had 2 months left to live. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" And Qian wiped away her tears, blaming me for always keeping secrets from her. If she hadn't overheard them, perhaps the next time she saw me, it would be at my grave. "I thought about telling you, but at that time, you were determined to divorce me. Was I supposed to use my life to emotionally blackmail you into staying with me for a few more months? I thought about telling you, but at that time, you were determined to divorce me. Was I supposed to use my life to emotionally blackmail you into staying with me for a few more months? I thought about telling you, but at that time, you were determined to divorce me. Was I supposed to use my life to emotionally blackmail you into staying with me for a few more months? Since we would die and separate sooner or later, what would be the point of doing that?" And Qian said that if she were the one with a terminal illness, she would never be as foolish as me, bearing all the grievances and pain alone without letting anyone know. And Qian said that if she were the one with a terminal illness, she would never be as foolish as me, bearing all the grievances and pain alone without letting anyone know. She held my hand tightly, hoping to remarry before I died. That way, even if we were separated by life and death, we would still be family. After I refused, she was very sad. "You still blame me. You still haven't forgiven me, have you? You still blame me. You still haven't forgiven me, have you?" I smiled and explained, "It has nothing to do with Zhou Zhili. I've already forgotten all the unpleasant experiences, really." "Then why don't you want to remarry me?" "Because I'm too tired." These few short words were exhausting for me to even say. If you include the time I fell in love with her at first sight, 8 years of marriage, 4 years of secret love, I loved her for a full 12 years. And the time she truly loved me was only a few short days. Perhaps after I die, she will quickly find a new love. No one can say for sure about these things. I don't need her to remain chaste for me, spending the rest of her life in regret and longing. Love or not, it's no longer that important. Anyway, I'm very happy to see you return to your work as a photographer. Tong Tong has also grown up and become much more sensible. If Changle can have the surgery successfully, it would be great if she could also go to school and study like a normal child. I casually glanced at her right hand and noticed a diamond ring on her ring finger. It was the wedding ring I gave her. I thought you had thrown it away long ago. She touched the ring and smiled. I was going to throw it away, but later I picked it out of the trash can. She looked at me deeply, without saying anything for a long time. But I seemed to hear what she wanted to say to me. I was going to throw it away, but later I picked it out of the trash can. She looked at me deeply, without saying anything for a long time. But I seemed to hear what she wanted to say to me. With the help of online media, Changle's father, who had become a homeless man, was found. He himself was unwilling to donate bone marrow to save his daughter. After the interview video was broadcast, he was scolded by people online. It was Qin who used 500,000 yuan as an exchange, and he agreed to the bone marrow transplant. The surgery was very successful. After a period of hospitalization and recuperation, Changle was transferred to Tong Tong's class. Because she was young and needed a guardian, and Qin went directly to Changle's parents and handled the procedures for relinquishing guardianship. Then she adopted her. My body weakened quickly. I was in pain all over, and breathing was also very painful. In the end, I couldn't even walk and could only lie in bed. And Qin took leave from the company to come to the sanatorium to be with me. I didn't want her to see me getting haggard day by day, and I didn't want to interfere with her work. But she insisted on staying by my side, watching over me every step of the way. Because the pain was so intense, I had to take a lot of painkillers every day, and the time I spent sleeping became longer and longer. Several times I woke up and saw that Qin's eyes were red and swollen. I knew she had been crying again, and I would raise my hand to touch her face. But gradually, I didn't even have the strength to lift my hand. And Qin said more than once that she regretted it. Starting from the 3rd year of our marriage, she suspected I was having an affair, and for so many years after that, she only felt disgust and resentment towards me. But if she really had no feelings for me at all, she wouldn't have cared so much. Unfortunately, she realized it too late. If she had asked me earlier and cleared up her suspicions, Zhou Zhili would never have appeared. The doctor issued me a critical condition notice and told my family to prepare for the worst. And Qin knelt by the bed, holding my hand tightly, tears streaming down her face, and asked me, "If there's a next life, would you still want to see me?" I smiled with relief and shook my head. She said with determined eyes, "It's okay. I will find you in the next life. I won't forget you. Before I find you, you can't fall in love with another woman. Promise me." Under her hopeful urging, I nodded, but we both knew in our hearts, once a person dies, nothing is left. Promises of the next life are just lies to comfort the living.